Whoops, I was off. Doing well. Good to see you.
Same here, same here. I think that's Paul Sturbko's empty chair I'm looking at, I think.
Yes.
It probably knows more about this process than I do.
There's the man, the myth, the legend, Rich.
Hey, Rich, how are you?
Paul,
Hey,
how
Paul.
are you?
Doing well.
Hello, everybody.
There.
Shall we start, Andrew, or are we still waiting?
We're up and ready to
Can I
go.
lose them for a second? Are we? Is this just when we've gone live? Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Can we hear? Sorry, we're having trouble hearing y'all in here.
Okay.
Okay.
Taking a little bit longer than usual to get us into the public access system, so stand
Okay.
by, please.
Hey, Mark, sometime tomorrow morning, we should connect about your commission, the Disability Commission deal.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yeah, let's connect about that tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Is anybody else hearing that weird noise?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's like a radio or something.
It's like, now it's gone.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we're good.
Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 10th meeting of the City Council Street Renaming Commission. Council staff, would you please proceed with the roll call?
Commissioner Westmoreland,
Present.
Commissioner Raymond,
Present.
Commissioner Sturbko,
Present.
Commissioner Connor,
Present.
Commissioner Hamilton, Commissioner Jackson, Commissioner Bayham, Commissioner Hill,
Here.
Commissioner Jones-Williams, we have 5 commissioners. I believe that's a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. Excuse me. So we are continue to operate under the COVID-19 pandemic protocol. So the COVID-19 pandemic continues to preclude us from meeting safely in a public forum. We must therefore continue to operate in this virtual fashion using the public comment guidelines outlined by the Louisiana Attorney General. Here are the public comment rules that we will follow today. At the beginning of the meeting, staff will read the agenda for today's meeting in its entirety. That agenda is also online at council.nola.gov. We will then recess for 10 minutes to allow citizens to submit written comments for any agenda item. Anyone wishing to comment should go to council.nola.gov and fill out an online public comment form. Only written public comments will be accepted. Public comment will be limited to 1 comment per person per item. Comments should also be limited to 2 minutes when read aloud and be germane to the agenda item at hand. Public comment will be closed at the end of the 10-minute public comment period. No written comments will be accepted beyond that point. Before voting on an agenda item, council staff will read any public comment received for a pending agenda item. Council staff, would you please read the agenda in full?
The agenda for the January 27th Street Renaming Commission meeting is as follows. Roll call, recess to receive public comment, approval of the minutes from the December 17th, 2021 meeting, expert panel update, report from expert panel leadership on progress this far, initial report update, review and discuss feedback to initial report, final report, discussion of timeline and contents of final report, stakeholder engagements, review of meetings held to date, preview of upcoming events, other matters, and adjournment.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will recess for 10 minutes. Andrew, what time should we all be back?
3:17.
3:17, perfect. See you all shortly.
Hello.
Is that Commissioner Jackson?
Yes, it is.
Hey, we're on the 10-minute recess. We'll be back at 3:17.
Okay, yeah, this is me. Okay, Carl.
Okay,
Three,
perfect.
three what now?
3:17, everyone will be back on.
Thank you.
All right.
And Commissioner, is that not working? Commissioners, that's been 10 minutes.
Give me 1 second, Andrew. I just dropped my glasses. I won't be able to say anything if I don't find them. Okay, thank you. Would you all care to do the roll call again, please?
Commissioner Westmoreland? Present. Commissioner
Present.
Commissioner Sturpko. Present. Commissioner Hill.
Present, yeah.
Present.
Commissioner Connor.
Present.
Commissioner Raymond.
Present.
Commissioner Hamilton. Commissioner Bayham. Absent. Commissioner Jackson.
Present.
Kevin, and we're missing Commissioner Jones Williams. Okay, we have 6 members. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. The remainder of the agenda will be our first quorum discussion on the listed items. Commissioners, your feedback is welcome as we progress as normal. Item 3, approval of minutes. Commissioners received a copy of the minutes from the December 16th meeting. Are there any corrections or questions about those minutes? Andrew, are there any public comments about the minutes?
Not about the minutes.
Okay. If there are no corrections or discussion, more further discussion needed, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as distributed.
I'll make a
So
motion.
moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second that the minutes from the December 16th meeting be approved. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Abstentions? Thank you. Minutes are approved. We move to item 4, expert panel update. Our expert panel has consistently and diligently continued researching the New Orleans streets and have updates and recommendations to share based on the ongoing research that they have had, as well as the public feedback that we've received in the interim. I want to continue to thank all those involved, and especially Sue Mobley and Thomas Adams, who have been coordinating that team. They've been, extremely thorough and responsive, and I cannot begin to say thank you enough for the amount of information that you all have amassed, along with the public library staff, to help us get the information out to the public on this. So with that, I'll turn it over to Thomas for an update.
Thank you, Commissioner, and good to see everyone in the new year. We don't have too much of an update. I'm happy to reiterate some of the preliminary things for our 3 names for Locate Street that we suggested back from the December meeting, if need be. I think that is, and then as well, perhaps I suspect this should come in the discussion of Conrad Street as well, but I do have, I can reiterate the possibilities of Conrad Street should the commission decide to basically move the suggestions of Walker Street and to vote on the suggestions of Walker Street to Conrad Street. So I'm happy to do that now. I'm happy to put forward the 3 names that the panel of experts researched and tied to the neighborhood around Delgado College, in particular for Locate Street, or again, I'm happy to wait on that.
Well, if you would just kind of give an overview of the suggestions that you all made,
Sure.
just to remind.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the course of responding to public feedback regarding various names in Lakeview, just to reiterate for any members of the public watching as well, the panel of experts decided fairly conclusively that Walker Street should fall off the list per city council criteria of renaming, but also in its place, the Conrad Street should be added. And I can kind of go through the specifics of that, and if need be, and if commissioners would like me to reiterate those. In regards to Conrad Street taking Walker Place, our recommendation, given the proximity of those streets, 1 block away from each other, is that to continue with the recommendations for Walker, of which we have already provided. For Locate Street, this represents a new and a new street added to the commission's purview. It is in, as opposed to the other street that fell off, Leonidas Street, of which, after research, again, the panel of experts came to the conclusion that it likely does not honor Leonidas Cape Polk, although not definitively. That Leonidas Cape Polk continued to be prominent in Louisiana when, in fact, the street was named, but that name did occur before the Civil War. So anyway, to reiterate for Locate Street, the three names we put forward include Michael Mazzell Nelson, who was a professor of history and public historian who began his career nearby at Delgado College and provided New Orleans with some of its most critical institutions and resources for remembering African American and working class history, as well as the history of Italian Americans and Irish Americans in the city. Mazzell Nelson was a co-founder of New Orleans Historical and the Hurricane Digital Memory Bank, as well as a lifelong activist for social justice. He passed away in 2014 at the young age of 49. Another suggestion was Melanie Defendal, a longtime and much beloved professor of sociology at Delgado. In 2003, she founded the Irma Thomas Center for Women in Search of Excellence. She received Delgado's Seymour Weiss Excellence in Teaching Award in 2017. Defendale also worked with the Vietnam Veterans Family Support Program at LSU Health Sciences Center, and was honored for her work by several organizations, including the Mayor's Military Advisory Committee, the Military Order of the Purple Heart, and the Vietnam Veterans of America. And she tragically passed away this past summer in 2020 at the age 68 of COVID-19. And then finally, number 3, Charles McKenna was an Irish immigrant and a founding member of the New Orleans Mechanics Society in 1806. The Mechanics Society worked across the city's crafts to make sure the numerous skilled laborers in New Orleans received good wages and working conditions. He rose to president of the Mechanics Society by 1833, the year he, like so many Irish immigrants who worked on digging the nearby New Basin Canal, succumbed to a deadly cholera outbreak. And again, those are our 3 suggestions, again, based on kind of trying to tie potential renames to the neighborhood and to kind of the nearby location of the street. So those are suggestions for Locate Street. I think that's pretty much ties up this report in particular. And again, I'm happy to answer questions about that or to go back and talk about some of the Lakeview research we did, if need be, for the commissioners when the time comes.
Okay, thank you very much, Thomas. Commissioners, do you have any questions of Thomas currently? I will give you a preamble that in the next item number, the streets that he just discussed in Lakeview are the first item of things that were given to us for reconsideration since they provided us those choices at the last meeting, and it'll lead off the discussion about other items that were given to us for reconsideration. So just, if you have any questions now, please feel free to ask. Hearing none. Andrew, are there any public comments on the
Yes, there are.
report?
Okay, 1 second here. Okay, first public comment is by Val Cupid, and unless I state otherwise, all of these people say that they are not a paid representative. Good afternoon. I've lived in New Orleans since 1954. I've spent 40 years of my life helping to improve the living conditions along with many others before me and alongside many others to improve the quality of life in our area. I attended the last virtual meeting in November 2020. Thanks to Lakeview Civic Improvement Association, specifically our expert Tim Brinks and our president Trey Babin, for a spot-on report of the truth of the history of our street names in Lakeview. This can be viewed by the public at www.lakeviewcivic.org for all to see. I was disturbed by the tone of your experts that were assigned by this committee on the 11/2020 virtual meeting. The tone of voice indicates a particular personal feeling. Disparaging, sarcastic is the best way I can describe that they sound to me. We, the citizens, are not to blame for pointing out facts that we have considered for possible consideration. We, the taxpayers, are not to blame because your experts did not involve the public sooner and came to decisions without thorough and partial investigations of historical fact. We come to this table proudly present our findings. Like it or not, it is not personal to your panel of experts. Twisting facts to meet your political views is not doing justice to the cause for which you were assigned. Guessing at what happened and why is not what you have been assigned to do. After the 11/2020 meeting, I have total respect for this commission and the job they were tasked to do, especially our council member, Mr. Joseph Giarruso's appointment of Mr. Paul. Depending on the experts to help guide the discussions and decisions, it is my opinion that since there seems to be question on some street names that there should be tabled for later review. The Mexican-American War was very much part of Louisiana history, and we should be proud of its being. Val Cupid, Lakeview resident. Next question is from Julian Hillary, not a paid representative. We are against changing New Orleans street signs as we are a unique city and we do not wish to follow national views. Why give up our identity as a one-of-a-kind city and following national ideas is never good. We are an all-inclusive city, always will be, and our origination was because we had people of all kinds trading anything and everything. Our only central position was be for anyone as long as could keep trading. All of these characters made NOLA what it is. We do not want any change in our street signs. What a waste of money. If we really wanted to be useful, we would drive around the city and take away property of neglected houses and lots and put them to better use, be proactive with sewer and water. We have a leak in front of Costco that deluges water on a major street and it goes unlooked at. And we have time to worry about street signs. Be realistic and represent us, not your national fame. Juby Hillary. The next comment is by Dr. Amy L. Sandridge. I am very much opposed to renaming of streets within the greater New Orleans area. It saddens me that a small group of 7 individuals who are not elected with remit to change the names of streets, taking this matter so far in a time when citizens are preoccupied with other matters in relation to COVID. Next comment is by Lori Jackson, not a paid representative. Although I'm not a resident of New Orleans, I'm an 83-year-old native of the city and visit within the city limits frequently, shopping, dining, and contributing to the city's income. Since Katrina 15 years ago, there remain streets without street signs, and you are advocating changing the names of those with signs, further frustrating drivers in digital directions such as MapQuest. It is not logical. New Orleans city governments would better address attention to correcting the plethora of potholes that resemble in some instances sinkholes. Next comment is by Carrie Slayton, not a paid representative. Appalling. I believe it's supposed to be a motion evoked with the suggestions for street name changes in New Orleans. The swapping game being played will splinter the city even more. Read the story about the name changes in this paper's coverage on Friday, November 27, 2020. The composition of the appointed street renaming committee is much less than a representative sampling of the city's population. Majority of the suggestions simply injects blacks for white. This is an unacceptable situation. Leah Chase Circle? No. Tootie Montana Street? No. Swapping street names with Confederate attachment for enslaved individuals? Reprehensible. One name cannot be substituted for another. If continued ancestry must be fully vetted, a double standard must be eliminated. For example, the projected vice president-elect denounces slavery, but has a family history of slave ownership that has been acknowledged and verified. Robert E. Lee, despite his incredible service to our nation, has been chastised and denounced because his wife's family owned slaves. Cultural symbols, yes. Jazz, yes. Mardi Gras, yes. Seafood, yes. Culinary, yes. This ridiculous waste of time is going to continue, then research what will bind our community. The City Council Street Renaming Committee members need to work for their constituents. Also, why is this matter sidestepping public vote? Right now, no one is speaking for me because I want things left alone. I do not support the cancel culture. Next comment is from Peter Lesses, not a paid representative. I'm completely against renaming the streets in New Orleans. This is America spelled with a K. Next comment is by Stan Richard, not a paid representative. I do not think that Drew Street should be renamed. The street is named after the entire Drew family. If it was named for Charles Drew, it would bear his full name. The House of Drew came from France and played an important role in New Orleans history. Mathurin Drew accompanied Bienville and helped select the site for New Orleans. The Drew family settled along Bayou St. John. They named the area Gentilly. The Drew family developed this area. The Drew family is married or can be traced in the genealogical records of almost every one of the early aristocratic families of New Orleans. This information and more can be found in the book Creole Families of New Orleans by Grace King. The next comment is by Charles Marsala, not a paid representative. Dear Commissioners, thank you for your service. I'm commenting on the expert panel update. Please note, normally public comments are made after hearing the agenda item, not before. Thus, comments this meeting are influenced from presentations made from the last meeting. Today's news reports that experts in San Francisco have decided to remove George Washington and Abraham Lincoln's names from schools. At the last meeting, I noted that Abraham Lincoln's remarks in 1858 were strongly defining white supremacy, and that the New Orleans Commission experts should review removing Washington and Lincoln and others from street signs and parks. I do not know if the experts plan to address suggestions from the public to be reviewed. I suggested the experts review Mayor Walmsley and Mayor Morrison for their history of white supremacy. I asked the experts to report not only on people deemed qualifying by the motion, but people cleared from future removals. I would note to the commission that experts can filter what to use to make their point or to meet their directive unless and thus have experts of both sides make a more qualified report. For example, why did the experts leave out that Jordan Noble was a captain in the Confederate Army over 100 men? Is it because of political pressure? Why did the experts leave out that during the coup of the Battle of Liberty Place, the Black State Treasurer was left in office as he was well respected? Why did the experts leave out at Jackson Barracks the streets Beauregard and Lee were probably named after their stay in Jackson Barracks during the Mexican-American War? Is there political pressure to omit or filter content on any items? The next comment is by Hunter McFadden. Renaming streets will cause chaos with mail deliveries, personal identification, driver's license, passport, internet, etc. Instead of renaming, why not put up street signs honoring those who are selected, but under the existing signs? That way people may refer to the streets by whichever name they choose, but the official address would stay the same. Next comment is by Kenneth Logan, not a paid representative. Florida Lee Victory, good names. Next comment is by Shannon Scott. I wish to address the mayor and council as publisher, mapmaker, historian, member of Save Our Cemeteries, tour guide, and board member of the Sons of Liberty, who personally oversees honoring and protecting the graves of all fallen soldiers. As mapmaker, at the very minimum, I wonder if this is a practical use of government, meaning the confusion alone in electronic map world and printed map world will add innumerable expense to those in charge of renaming streets, but also a great deal of confusion to untold millions attempting to coordinate life as they explore the city. It will also take some years for what I generally call the map industry to fully catch up. As a daily user of streets, I wonder if it is really the average person's process as they go to and fro to really absorb or have desire to absorb the meaning of street names or the reasons for their naming. I think it was Caesar who said that the average citizen was more concerned by a pebble in their sandal than they are the goings on of upper reaches of power. Obviously, in some cases, streets were named to honor certain individuals of their achievements or recognition of certain groups, like Tivoli Circle in 1810. And these are obviously honorary moments, but as time passes for the average citizen or tourist, they are simply guides from point A to point B in a practical way. Further to the practicality, I truly question if there's a mass movement to rename streets or is one of politics. There's certainly romance to street names, I agree, as they symbolize chapters, but they really are just streets. I don't think the daily person is giving them much thought, as the effort before this council. I would offer that this council work to unite the community for building of new monuments or renaming streets with perhaps conventional DOT or city planner sounding names to bear the names of other historical figures that can be agreed upon. From the outside looking in, I've heard the argument that this is this erasing of history, of moving a monument, and that is 2 minutes. Next comment is by Matthew Mueller. To the city government of the New Orleans, the quest of historical editing and censorship that you embark upon does zero service to your constituents. In fact, it insults and inconveniences them at best. Specifically, you have appallingly taken upon yourself to exist as the autocrats of the entire city's nomenclature. The self-importance with which you have the power to decide which street names are acceptable or unacceptable is a form of presentism that silences not only the voices of the past, but that of your own constituents in the present. To add further insult to an already egregious injury, the council has selected a rubber-stamped committee of experts who have clear and implicit bias, as well as a documented lack of understanding of local history and culture. Specifically, there are members of the committee who do not even live in New Orleans. How can non-citizens have more access, influence, or decision-making power, or a matter of culture than the citizens of New Orleans themselves? Even more, some members of the committee, like Mr. Westmoreland, have gone on public record countless times expressing their clear disdain of certain relics, images, and names from the past. Isn't this a clear conflict of interest, especially when one considers the express purpose of the committee is to explore, research, and then make their decisions based on the aforementioned research? How can one with such overt bias serve on a committee like this when you have already admittedly made up their mind? Even worse than this, it has been discovered and proven that most, if not all, of the research done for the committee has been undertaken by college students in Australia. Yes, Australia. The geographic, cultural, and historical differences create an obviously flawed set of data. For example, Leonidas Street, named for the famed Greek king of Sparta, has been incorrectly assigned as a street recommended for renaming. Why? Because the less than quality research done by college students overseas asserted that Leonidas Street was named after Leonidas Polk, a general in the Civil War, even despite the fact that, and that is 2 minutes. The next comment is by Pam Thompson. And I'm sorry, there's no actual comments in there. Next comment is by Melvin Schneider. Please defer renaming streets in the future. The city is struggling too much with the pandemic, along with crime, healthcare, education, hunger, and employment to burden the city and businesses with changing stocks of letterhead, customer and vendor addresses. Government officials and the citizens would better serve if they focused and tried to fix problems that affect quality of life rather than symbolic names, which will not affect anyone's lives once changed. Renaming commission, the city council are playing Nero's fiddle while New Orleans, Rome burns. And the final comment is from Timothy Brinks, not a paid representative. The panel's conclusion that General Taylor Street was named after Confederate General Richard Taylor is incorrect and not supported by any historical records. In fact, the available historical records refute any possibility the street was named after the Confederate general. The map of New Orleans published by A. Bronsema in 1855 clearly shows General Taylor Street in its present day location uptown. The Civil War did not begin until 1861. Thus, General Taylor Street was named at least 6 years before the Confederacy had ever come into existence. This 1855 map is readily available online and at the Historic New Orleans Collection. This is not the first time error has been raised to the commission and its research panel. A number of members of the public commented at the last public meeting about the same error, so I'm hopeful the error has already been corrected by the time you read this comment at today's meeting. However, when this error was raised during the last meeting, Thomas Adams defended the panel's initial conclusion and stated that even if the street name predated the Civil War, it should still be removed because Richard Taylor eventually did serve in the Confederacy. But Mr. Adams' position fails to account that Richard Taylor did not attain the rank of general in any army until 1861, which makes it impossible that General Taylor Street was named after him, since it was appearing on maps by 1855, 6 years before he was a general. In fact, the street was named after General Zachary Taylor, who was a general and hero of the Mexican-American War, who went on to be elected president. Panel's error here is similar to errors that were identified in Lakeview, where the default inclination to link street names to Confederates caused the panel to overlook facts and maps that were readily available via simple Google searches. The commission should correct this error and remove General Taylor from the list of streets to be renamed. And that is all the comment.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And while it has not been our common practice to address comments point by point, on occasion there is a reason to actually address some of the things that are said, and this to me is one of those occasions, to which I would like to ask Andrew, to your knowledge, the city council continues to work on other issues like street conditions, sewage and water board, and other major issues like the pandemic, correct?
Yes, that is work ongoing.
Thank you. Thomas, rough estimate, but over 90% of the streets in New Orleans are named after men and are devoid of women and people of color primarily, correct?
That would be probably at the low end, but yes.
Yep, so probably more like 95%.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. While I appreciate the remarks that the city should look at more streets under a wider purview based on a wider description of white supremacists and people who supported it or were slave owners, I appreciate that comment and hope that the city looks at that in the future for other work to be done post this commission's activities. So I appreciate the comment of that person who said we should broaden this as opposed to narrowing it. I am also an average citizen. I've always been an average citizen of New Orleans. And I have, since I was a young child, looked at the names of of the streets of New Orleans and wondered and then looked up who those people were. So to the commenter who said that people don't really know or care, that is incorrect. There are many who do know and care for whatever reasons their curiosity may be. And so it is incumbent on the city to make sure that its streets reflect things that are pertinent to all of its citizens, not just some, and those who may wander aimlessly and don't care about who and what they see. The last thing I'll say is that while Commissioner Westmoreland may be on record for his support of removing certain statuary around the city and the like. I'm also on record for wanting to retain certain statuary for context purposes. So there's a very even balance to this commission. And the remarks that it is unbalanced or filled with people who have bias is just untrue. So with that, if,
Commissioner-
do you all have any comments on this section of the agenda? Hearing none.
Commissioner, may I respond to a couple things?
Yes.
Given my name was both mentioned and a couple of impediments of this report. First, I want to reiterate to anyone who may be listening that, and to reiterate from the document that we circulated about a month ago in the last meeting, the identification of streets for removal originated with the Times-Picayune map of July 21st, 2015, created by Dan Swenson and Blake LaRose with additional support from Dr. Jacob Wagner. New Orleans Public Library, as part of this process, did additional research on each of the identified streets and their presumed eponyms, eliminating streets like Polk through the alignment of that street with other presidential streets spaced evenly throughout Lakeview. A panel of experts reviewed and expanded on this research, as well as identifying additional streets for removal. I want to address Leonidas Street, which in particular appears attributed to Leonidas K. Polk in Donald Gill's The Stories Behind New Orleans Street Name. Again, this process and the research for this process draws on a plethora of primary and secondary research. And with that one in particular, we drew upon the standard secondary source, Donald Gill's work, and the initial recommendation, and then upon public comment and further research, we changed it. That's comment as well that I will take back to the panel in regards to General Taylor Street. I would also, again, additionally address as well, I'm not sure if this directly referred to me, but I am a 23-year resident of the city of New Orleans, even though my official appointment is at the University of Sydney. And amongst the people who worked on this report included research assistants from a number of my students, many of whom are excellent, all of whom were excellent students. All of that research was vetted and vetted by multiple editors, including myself, and including other members of the panel of experts. None of us are paid. And that's an important thing to point out here. And so this was a tremendous opportunity that I happen to have in this context to give my students, again, all of whom are excellent, the ability to contribute to a project like this. So again, that's explanation for any country worth there. And again, I wanted to put that on the record.
Thank you, Thomas. And I just want to make sure that the public understands that that wasn't a defensive comment. That was so that everyone who was not aware of how this panel was devised and the support that it was compiled rather. Thomas was just giving you the backdrop to that. We have overall throughout this process accepted and sought out public comment and made changes where that comment has influenced how we think about the streets that were on the initial list. So, you know, the pliability of this commission is something that I have actually been very happy about from the beginning. The whole point was to educate the public, get them involved so that they could in turn educate us, not just on their feelings about the changes, but on the substantive things that we have gotten from them as well on the names of certain people's streets, and particularly the involvement of the folks in District A through Paul Sterbko, you know, have given us a lot of information that has led to us making some changes to the things that we were looking at initially. So I appreciate both the panel's work as well as the public's input. So with that, we'll move on to item 5, which is the initial report. In November of 2020, we voted on initial recommendations. We have continued stakeholder engagement meetings since then, and we'll consider recommendations that have been made from the public, our experts, and city council members when they get things from the constituents that they turn over to us. The following reconsiderations have been submitted to the commission to date. One, Thomas has already discussed, several, the Lakeview streets, Walker to Conrad, and then Loke for either Diefendahl, Mizell, Nelson, or McKenna. One thing I'll state before I finish going through this, it is not my intention for us to vote on these things today. I want to continue to look at all the input that's given to us, and we will have the vote on these at the next meeting, because by that point we will have reached the almost last moment that we can accept some comment that would have input on the final report that we give to the city council. But of course, at that point, we encourage the public to continue to do their outreach to the city council members, who ultimately are the ones who make the decisions about whether any of this stuff happens. So as you hear final report from this commission know that no decisions are final because we don't make the decisions. We simply are advisory and make recommendations. So outside of the Walker to Conrad and Loke for Diefendahl, Mizell, Nelson, or McKenna, we've also received recommendations for dividing some existing streets and giving them dual names or split names on certain portions. An example of that would be Governor Nichols and Robert E. Lee, and we'll talk about that as we move along. We've been asked to reconsider naming Robert E. Lee after both Alan Toussaint, and reverting part of the street to, I'm sorry, let me back up. We were asked to reconsider naming Robert E. Lee in its entirety, Alan Toussaint Boulevard, and revert a portion of the street to Hibernia. That portion of the street that primarily runs through District A is, and Paul, please correct me if I'm wrong about that, as one of the comments that we've received on that. We've also been asked to reconsider naming Robert E. Lee Lake Avenue or Lake Boulevard. We've been asked to reconsider naming Governor Nichols for Lolis Eli in these ways. One, revert the street name back to Hospital Street, split the street name between Bayou Road and Hospital Street, split the name between Bayou Road and Lolis Edward Eli, name it Bayou Road all the way, reconsider naming the entire street as Father Jerome Ledoux, or name the street for Oscar Dunn. So again, stop me if you all want to talk about any of this, but I'm just listing the changes now, and we can have a comprehensive conversation after I've listed everything, if that's what you prefer. We've been asked to reconsider naming Penn Street to Marcellé Noair instead of Sarah Mail, which was our initial recommendation. We were then asked to reconsider naming Capdeville for Rudnay or Ortique instead of Lamel. We've been asked to reconsider naming Tulane Avenue for Oscar Dunn instead of Tootie, Montana. We've been asked to consider naming Washington Artillery Park for Oscar Dunn or the 2nd Louisiana Native Guard, or a combination of the two. We've been asked to revisit the naming of Sims Street or Slidell Street for Edwin Williams, who was one of the suggestions we got from the historians, who was killed by a group of white sailors as he was headed to a church along that street, Sims Street, I believe, and murdered during the Civil Rights era. We were asked to consider naming a street in Algiers, possibly for the Algiers 7. We've also been asked to name Lee Circle after a concept which encompasses more figures who could be honored there instead of Leah Chase. We've been asked, the American Italian Federation of the Southeast believes that Tivoli Circle is still the legal name for Lee Circle, and they want us to either admit it is not within the ordinance that created this commission, and or to change, and or to recommend that the circle also be named Tivoli Circle. We think that and have said this to the representatives from the Federation, that the legality of the street is something that needs to be discussed with the City Planning Commission or the City Council, not with this commission. That's not part of our purview to do that kind of research, but also what we believe that our job was to recommend a name for the plot of land that sits in the middle of that circle, where the statue of Robert E. Lee once resided. And that is eligible for renaming under this commission's purview. And that includes possibly naming it Tivoli Circle should this commission so choose to make that recommendation. So we appreciate, because you have done extensive outreach to us about that, and we appreciate it greatly. We've also been asked to reconsider naming Lee Circle Bulbancha Way, which is after the indigenous people of the area here. We've been asked to reconsider naming Palmer Park and or Palmer Avenue after Earl Palmer instead of John Minor Wisdom or Ms. Stern, as has been previously recommended. We've also been asked to reconsider naming Beauregard to Wisner, since it is an extension of Wisner. Those are the things that we have. It is a comprehensive list that I'm aware of. If there are others that we've missed, if any of the commissioners are aware of others, please bring that to our attention now. If the public heard something or didn't hear something that they thought that they had submitted through the website or through their council office, please, we welcome you commenting on that, which is why we're not going to vote on these today. We're going to vote on it at the next meeting, so we can have those things addressed prior to that meeting. So commissioners, do you have any questions or comments about the items that we've been asked to reconsider? What I would like to have some discussion on these things today, so that when we get to the next meeting, you know, we're literally going in and only talking about things we haven't discussed before and voting for the sake of efficiency. The commissioners, do any of you have any comments about any of the reconsiderations we've been asked to make? Hearing none, I would. Paul, Commissioner Sturko?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. I don't know if this directly addresses what you just said, Carl, but if I understood Thomas correctly, Conrad Street, there have been 3 suggested names in place of Conrad. I think one of the suggestions was Nelson and one was McKenna, if I understood. I'm not sure that I understood that, but
Commissioner, I could say no. I apologize for being unclear there. No, for Conrad Street, the suggestion was just to move, because we took Walker off the list after further research, was to move the suggestions for Walker to Conrad a block away. The ones for Loic Street those were the ones for Loic Street.
Okay, got it.
And I think the one for Conrad is Jasper that we put in the initial report.
All right, let me make a note of that.
Exactly.
So the 3 suggestions are for Luke. Okay.
For Luke, yeah.
It was Nelson, McKenna, and what was the third one?
Diefendahl.
Yeah. And that's Mizell Nelson too, hyphenated.
All right. I think we need to take a look, because I may be wrong about this, but I believe in Orleans Parish, there is a Nelson Place and a McKenna Street already. So we just need to double check that and make sure that we're not duplicating names.
Well, and just a reminder, Paul, the City Planning Commission will work that, and so I don't think it's an issue if there is a same last name, as long as they can differentiate between the streets based on other aspects of the person's name.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's okay. So in the end, that's probably not our purview anyway. That's all gonna be vetted.
Yeah. I think we simply just need to look at the suggestions or come up with another based on our own thoughts or the thoughts of people that we receive from the areas that are impacted, and decide who we think is most worthy to be associated with the street, and then let the CPC do what it does.
Okay. And my other question is there a place where I could go, or we can go, that actually summarizes all of the suggested revisiting or changes that you just listed?
I can send it to you. It's
pretty extensive.
Yeah, and you've got emails from the various people who made these suggestions already in your commission box. I just brought them together, so I'll send you the list I'll send everyone the list that I compile.
And I appreciate you doing that. It would just make it easier, because I can, instead of having to scroll through all those emails, we can go to one document and take a look and then go from there.
No, trust me. I wish that I had the ability to get somebody to do that for me beforehand too, but actually I don't, because it was good to go back and reread the other comments that the public made as they made those suggestions. The one thing I want to reemphasize for the public good here is, that this is an education process that goes both ways, and I speak for myself, but I'm sure that most of the other commissioners will agree that we have been edified by the things that we've read. And of course, you get some things that are more conventional wisdom than are fact, but that's the whole point to having the panel of experts and others to help us try to sort that out. And the dialogue we've had between those experts and the folks who've made suggestions has borne out to be a good process to help us, come to understanding what is more likely than not the actual fact of a street. So we appreciate the back and forth. That's the whole point to this commission.
Right.
Yep.
Agree. Okay, thanks. I appreciate that, Carl.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. And so the one thing I was going to say was that the one thing I wanted to comment on was the dividing of streets. I based on commenting from the public city planning commission, rather, I don't think that it is a preference of the planning commission to split street names for purposes of ease of use, basically, and the GIS information that needs to be changed when streets are changed and things of that nature. I believe that we will get some more information about that specifically as we approach the next meeting. And of course, we'll share that both with the panel and the public. But outside of just the practicality of splitting the street, I think that we have to be cautious that we don't inadvertently create a sense of a dual system or a dual city here by placing names in parts of the city that, while in a vacuum seem to be appropriate, may indicate in a broader sense that it's a divided city, right? And an example of that would be, for me, would be Robert E. Lee being split between Hibernia and Allen Toussaint. And again, in a vacuum, reverting to Hibernia, which was one of the names the street had previously, seems to make sense, right? But when you look at it outside of that vacuum and in the context of why this ordinance was passed in the first place and our partial, result of our work, which has been to restore some equity to the naming of the streets, because as I asked Thomas earlier, you all heard that 95% or more of the streets don't reflect the true city's constituency, right? Based on gender and or color. So, if with this process, there are some equitable changes that occur, I think that that is a good thing, even if it is an offshoot of our efforts simply to do the patriotic thing and removing these Confederate names or those who supported those efforts. So I would ask that the public, one, think about that a little deeper for us so that we can engage in this dialogue as we enter the final month before we do our report in a way that is all encompassing and not just simply in a vacuum. Before I leave that, if anybody else has something they want to say about that, they're more than welcome to.
Well, I would just note that just to reemphasize what you said earlier, that it's actually the rules and regs of the CPC do say that they want that streets are not to be split. I mean, there can be an exception. So the rule is to not do that. And, yes. and the exception is something that needs to be discussed and adopted.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate that edification. Does anyone else have a comment? The only other thing I would suggest for discussion for you all today is on the Governor Nichols, since we've received so many different parts of it to reconsider, some of which entailed splitting as well. Again, I'll just reiterate, not in favor of the splitting for multiple reasons, but certainly practical from the CPC standpoint, but also we don't want to send inadvertent messages as we do that. The other would be that, this process and the reconsideration notifications that we got has solidified a conversation we had previously that there should be a place for Oscar Dunn in this city. That does not exist. I am a strong proponent of that being Washington Artillery Park for the prominence of the space, because he does deserve to have a place of prominence. In Reconstruction era politics, he loomed large and possibly larger than pretty much any other Reconstruction era politician you could name. And so, that being said, not so much in favor of switching it for Governor Nichols, though he does have a connection to Governor Nichols because they existed in the same era, apparently. But I think that Washington Artillery Park would just be a more fitting space. And then the other suggestion that we got was that it possibly be Tulane Avenue. I agree that it is a grand space. Tulane Avenue is a grand avenue that is befitting of someone like Oscar Dunn. So from a secondary standpoint, that may also be something to consider. But you all need to look at that and make your own determinations, before we get to the next meeting about what's the most important to you as we move forward on this. Does anyone else have a comment on that?
Carl, I do. I think it's a bad idea to set the precedent for us as a commission that we split any street. Because then who's to say, well, why not split every street, right? I think it's just a bad example, and we should almost have a policy as the Street Renaming Commission.
Well, we kind of do, Mark, because we've said that we are going to try to comply with the CPC guidelines.
Excellent.
Yeah, and where we were not doing that, we would certainly recommend that to the public and, basically give our rationale for it. And so far, the only place that I'm aware that has been done is with Capiteville, because Judge Ivan Lamel is still alive, right? And that would be different from the norm for CPC. And since we are on Capiteville, I'll just go straight to that. Again, the names that we've been asked to reconsider for Capiteville are Rudnay and Ortique, which was the original, two of the original suggestions as well. It was brought to my attention that Rudnay had an office close to Capiteville, which was not something we discussed at the last, at the meeting when we voted on the initial recommendations. I will reiterate that the street runs behind the federal court, which is where Judge Ivan Lamel sits and where his part of history was made, which was also part of the reason why it was suggested for that street, because it was just, the nexus was obvious in there. So as we go toward the next meeting, think about those things as we reconsider some of these names as well. The other thing I'll say to that is with Justice Ortique, there should be something in the city named after him. But the one thing I want the public to be aware of is that, just because these are the streets we are looking at, it's not the only way to ask for a street to be changed in someone's honor. I mean, you could always go to the regular process to do that, particularly if it's a street that doesn't fit the parameters of our ordinance, but maybe some street that is more germane to the person. Okay. And I think that's all I had on that. If commissioners don't have any other comments or questions, I would ask Andrew if there are any public comments on this part of the agenda.
Yes, there are.
Okay.
First comment is by David Rubenstein, not a paid representative. Of course, we love Alan Toussaint, who put New Orleans music on the world map. Our leaders, such as Moon Landrieu, the first mayor to really start leadership integration, Dutch Morial, our first Black mayor, F.D. McKinney, or S.F. Phillips, Black lawyers who argued for Plessy before the U.S. Supreme Court. Victor Séjour, regarded as Louisiana's greatest French language playwright. Norbert Rieu invented a new technique of sugar refining that revolutionized the industry. Ferdinand Joseph Lamoth, known as Jelly Roll Martin, or Sidney Bechet. We should be looking for people who can set examples for our youth of what hard work and learning can do for you. Last, I suggest Lee Circle should go back to being nameless. Now everyone understands how offensive the dedication to slavery it was. The column should be removed, and the name could be the Circle or something of the committee's choice. Finally, if it is named for someone, that person will always be known for the controversy their name has caused. I loved everything Leah Chase did and stood for. Remember the Obama gumbo Tabasco? But one thing she never was or wanted to be known for was controversial. I suggest there are better streets to name for Miss Chase. Make the street renaming a success. The next comment is by Stephen Hagstedt, not a paid representative. As a citizen growing up in New Orleans, the city has many more important needs for which money needs to be spent on than erasing our history. Thanks for concerning to spend our ever limited money on more important things than renaming streets. Next comment is by Elizabeth Diaz, not a paid representative. I think there's more serious work that needs to be done in our city rather than renaming streets. We have major issues that require time to deal with that are way more important than changing names of historic streets. It isn't harming anyone, and I don't think the rewards will be great. History should not be removed ever. It should be built upon. If there are new areas or streets, example near the convention center, NOLA can name those areas or spots. Next comment is by Johan Batiste. The city needs to evaluate Homer Plessy Way existing as a public thoroughfare in 2021. Homer Plessy's cousin, Antoine Plessy, discussed Homer's father and grandfather in the 2006 nonfiction book, Songs from My Fathers. Their original name was Duplessis. Antoine stated the grandfather, in fact, had been a wealthy free man of color who owned slaves, threw in his lot with the Confederacy, and was wiped out by the collapse of Confederate money. Author Tom Sancton quoted Antoine Plessy stating, Homer Plessy felt superior to the American-speaking colored because they had been slaves and were from lower social level than him. See, all the Creole families thought they were better than the ex-slaves. And to keep from going with these people, you know, there was prejudice. They established their own social clubs and dance halls all through the city. Sometimes you go in those places when they were holding a soiree and you wouldn't see a dark face. Well, they've done that purposefully. Will the city continue to have a street documented for documented racist against Black people? Next comment is by Gary Fretz. Not a paid representative. I understand the anger many have had over the bad actors of history. Our history is our history. We don't change it by editing it. We change it by learning from past mistakes. So if we think we are erasing memories of slavery by deleting slave owners' names, is that really helping? Don't we still have slavery today? I mean, isn't everyone making under a certain wage a slave today? Of course they are. We are not looking deep enough into this issue, which is really caused by the economic system we continue to use, which was invented by the Babylonians 4,000 years ago, and is referred to as the Babylonian money magic debt slave system. Please take time to educate yourself on this subject. There is a way out. The next comment is by Charles Marsala, not a paid representative. Dear Commissioners, thank you for your service. I'm commenting on the initial report update and feedback. After the initial 180-page report on 37 items was published, I drafted comments, which took over 20 pages and submitted for the December meeting. With 2 minutes to comment, this would be less than 4 seconds per item. So many items I could not comment on. The City Council motion called for a robust public comment, considering publishing the agenda a week in advance and have each street listed separately, both the ones to be changed and the ones researched and cleared, such as Lincoln, Washington, Walmsley, Morrison, and Lafitte. Jean Lafitte was a slave pirate with a slave market, holding pen and auction stage set up on Grand Terre Island, in Grand Isle, and everywhere else. Walmsley put up the white supremacy plaque on the Battle of Liberty Place Monument in 1932 with the approval of the City Council. 2015, politicians tried to convince the public that the marker was installed in 1891. Mayor Morrison was a strong segregationist from 1946 to 1960. However, there is no mention of these individuals on the initial report. Page 95 of the initial report notes that the legal name of the street since 1810 is Tivoli Circle. The ordinance of July 31st, 1877 named the land inside as Lee Place. In 2015, when the mayor and city council rescinded the 1877 motion, did they hide from the public this fact? In June 2020, a former staff member to the mayor started a petition, which was reported by Big Easy magazine, to just put up Tivoli Circle street signs. The city council motion does authorize renaming Tivoli Circle. Authorize remaining Tivoli Circle. Next comment is from Johan Batiste, has already made a comment.
Excuse me.
Actually, next 2 comments are from Mr. Batiste, but he has already made a comment on this item, and we are limited to 1 comment per item. Next comment is from Carmen Carter, not a paid representative. I am not in favor of erasing history, whether it be good or bad. Our history is learning tools of societal evolution and a steady reminder not to repeat the negative. That said, I suggest the following items for consideration. 1, let us not go down the misguided route of naming streets, business structures, and the like after a person. The risk of uncovering a flawed human is inevitable. Eventually, someone will be offended, and taxpayers, businesses, and consumers will once again be on the hook for the expensive adjustments. A safe bet is to stick to mundane items like botanical and animal species minus any denoting color in their name. We can't afford to leave room for creative interpretation. People are easily offended these days. Let's ensure future generations do not have to go through this agonizing quagmire and may concentrate their efforts reimagining crumbling infrastructure, flooding streets, failing public schools, and scarce employment opportunities. I am also concerned with new signage costs to taxpayers and the associated reprinting expenses to businesses already struggling to stay afloat during the pandemic. It is my wish the city will continue to embrace and safeguard its historic references and symbols from which lessons are gleaned. Auschwitz, remnants of the Berlin Wall, Great Wall of China are symbols of history not celebrated for the purpose or utilization of slave labor, instead serve to demonstrate society's ability to conquer such evils, not preclude them. New Orleans has a history of early biracial unions, a racially diverse slave ownership and population. Our history has helped to grow the city into predominantly minority-run local government. Erasing our history diminishes progress on so many fronts. Next comment is by Quinn Breland, not a paid representative. Thank you for your hard work on this controversial subject. My concerns are practical in nature. First, the cost of address changes on individuals and businesses, both time and money, is significant. It forces a large burden on businesses and residences during one of the worst economic crises the city has ever seen. Letterhead must be thrown out, bills change, etc. Think of all the advertising dollars that will have been wasted by businesses building up a brand at a certain address. This is a brick and mortar killer. I would strongly suggest a mechanism to allow these property owners who are directly affected by the renaming, i.e. own property on the street, to have input on the subject. Secondly, the proposed street names are way too long and cumbersome. If the streets are going to be renamed without the support of the affected addresses, I would implore you to at least just use the last names of the people like was suggested with Dent Drive, Georgia Street, and Jasper Street. Thank you for your consideration. Next comment is by James Bourdain, not a paid representative. In the report on Comus Court being changed, it gives as a reason the organization fighting against the Taylor Ordinance, which the report claims to be in the spirit of the Civil Rights Act. The blurb fails to mention that said ordinance was ruled unconstitutional. Comus did give Carnival its modern form in terms of parade with floats. The meeting of the courts is still the end of the Carnival season and is televised. I thus oppose renaming the street, given that the advocacy of this renaming has 3 to 4 people, 4 per street. More effective way of giving attention to these figures would be a book, as unless there are a myriad of other name changes going forward, most of the suggested figures won't get a street named after them. Next comment is by Jim Huddleston, not a paid representative. Dear honorable council members, I ask you today to vote against renaming of New Orleans iconic streets. As council members, each of you has dutifully accepted the role of steward and protector of New Orleans, including its unique history and culture. I believe these historic street names are part of the heritage that makes New Orleans stand out from other cities and should be preserved. So much history is tied to the city streets names: Martin Luther King Jr., Louis Armstrong, Napoleon, Galvez, Miro, Governor Nichols, Claiborne, Earhart, Tchoupitoulas, just to name a few. I should state here that I am a resident of Mobile, Alabama, but am a frequent visitor in New Orleans, happily supporting the city with my tourist dollars. I know that for me, your city's streets names bring to mind the wonderful histories and rich culture that makes New Orleans so special. Changing these street names will also bring confusion to tourists, and tourism is the lifeblood of New Orleans. In addition to the cost of making new signs and removing old ones, locals will be affected by the required road closures and detours. I'm sure residents prefer their tax dollars be spent in a way that would benefit them. This money could be better spent on fighting the rising crime rate, maybe even making repairs to those very roads that they travel daily. Please let me say that some of the people that are proposed to be honored with the street name are certainly worthy of being remembered. I would propose placing historical marker recognizing their accomplishments be placed at the appropriate location. Perhaps even a new monument or bust could be commissioned. Some of the musical icons in particular would certainly draw tourist attention if they were honored in that way. I believe there is room to maintain return monuments that have been removed and honor others in the same way. Your city is so special in its culture and history, and I think it should embrace all of it. There is nowhere else in the country like the Crescent City. My hope is that New Orleans leaders will support and save this history that makes their city special. Instead of bowing to current trends and what other cities are doing, they have a chance to show calmness and reason and to lead instead of following. Hopefully other cities will then draw inspiration from your leadership. Thank you for your time and thank you for your consideration on this matter. The next comment is by David Thomas, not a paid representative. I urge you not to rename city streets. Even if you do go forward with naming streets, I strongly urge you not to rename streets with modern day people. Contemporary people have not been tested over a long period of time to be virtuous. When Lee Circle was named, he had recently died and everyone thought it was a good idea. Now, decades later, some find fault with him and is not considered virtuous of having the circle named after him. The same could be hold true of the modern day names that are proposed. They may seem virtuous today, but in 20 or 50 years, generations to follow may find something unbecoming or not virtuous about the new names. I urge you not to change the names. But if you do, you should look back in history of the city and rename streets based upon the generation the current street names was part of. For example, Lee Circle is named for Lee, who lived between 1800 and 1870s. So you should match the time period and find a worthy candidate to replace the circle after someone who lived during the 1800s to 1870s. I ask that you not rename streets because it is history of the city, and history, rather good or bad, needs to be preserved. If you do change names, then you must change everything, even items that you presently like. The fleur-de-lis was used as a symbol and branded on the flesh of black slaves who tried to run away. It became a symbol of hate used to repress African American and instill fear of the consequence of breaking the law and the painful repercussions of trying to run away. How can you rename streets and leave the fleur-de-lis on city items and venues? How can you continue to look at the fleur-de-lis and yet be blinded to the thousands of black slaves that have had to have this symbol permanently and painfully hot branded onto their flesh? I ask you again, do not erase history, leave it, and let history tell you both the good and bad stories of the city. But if you do erase history, then all history has to be erased, not just the stuff you don't like. The next comment, is by Melvin Schneider. Not a paid representative. These reports were put together too hastily with not enough community engagement or thought or research into the issue. Citizens have brought forth evidence that Lakeview streets were named for Mexican war heroes and Leonidas was named that as early as 1833. With additional research, more errors in the hastily and shoddily prepared research initially reported will likely be refuted. As the research indicate, the name of Tivoli Circle has never been changed, so there's no need to rename a landmark for Italian pride. Please defer these discussions and reports to future dates so comprehensive comments, discussions, and research can be completed without the constraints of global pandemic limiting access to research and communication. Next comment is by Shane J. Alvarez, not a paid representative. The council and other government entities that have decided to change our city streets, and landscapes without a vote of the people of New Orleans is unbelievable. Not only abuse of power, but also waste of money that the city doesn't have, but in the middle of a pandemic in which the citizens of the city are suffering for your focus to be on streets and statues that most people in the city barely look at. Your willingness to spend millions without a vote of the people is outrageous, and you're thinking that spending money to change the names, thinking it will change people's lives in New Orleans is ridiculous to say the least. Leave the names alone and use the money to help businesses and people in New Orleans. Next comment is by Joel Cowden. I enthusiastically support returning Lee Circle to Tivoli Circle. The name evokes the rich history of the circle in completely splendid and uncontroversial way. Next comment is by Carlos Setti. I'm in full support of renaming Lee Circle to its original name of Tivoli Circle. Thank you. Next comment is by Mary Meising Gubala, not a paid representative. Once again, I would like to advocate for homeowners, renters, businesses along the streets that are proposed for renaming. Before consideration of renaming an additional 37 streets, has an analysis been done on the renaming of Jefferson Davis to Norman Francis? This could serve as a house-by-house case study to assess how many residents knew about the name change initially being discussed, that the name was changed, received the postcard itemizing the agencies that they need to notify about their street name change, what additional agencies and other items had to be notified and or changed. Have they done these notifications or changes? How much time or money have the changes cost them? I believe it is grossly unfair to subject our residents to these times and money and expenditures. Additionally, it is grossly irresponsible of our city to be spending time and money on this when we have major issues to deal with like crime, drainage, streets, not to mention the pandemic. The next comment is by the Reverend Gregory T. Manning, not a paid representative. I asked the renaming commission would give careful consideration to the renaming of Lee Circle as Bulbancha Way, the name the Indigenous Committee called New Orleans before the arrival of Europeans. This name would also lift up the African American community due to its connection with the Mardi Gras Indians. Embracing the name Bulbancha Way and not Circle would erase the previous association with white supremacy. This renaming would create unity, heal, and express the diversity within our system, within our city. I look forward to the opportunity to present the Bulbancha Way project to the renaming commission as soon as possible. Next comment is by Dave Thomas, but this is on an agenda item he has already commented on, and you are only allowed one comment per agenda item. Next comment is by William McGrath, not a paid representative. Oh, I'm sorry, that's for the next item. Those are all the comments on this one.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Commissioners, do you have any other comments or questions about this particular agenda item? Hearing none, we will move on to item 6, the final report. Our final report, as you all know, is due at the end of next month, at the end of February. And that is the final report of recommendations from this commission to the city council. When the city council receives that report, they will study it, hopefully very thoroughly, and then have the right to adopt some of the changes and recommendations we made, or adopt none of them, right? It is an advisory report that we're providing. We will be, as we turn it in, very proud of it, as we were of the initial report, based on all the input and content that we have had for it. As I said earlier, at our next meeting, which will likely be the second week of February, I have to get with Andrew to find the appropriate date. But I think the second week of February would be the right space. That would give us a almost 2-week period to let the public ruminate on the things we've talked about today, let you all study more deeply the recommendations that we received from the public, as well as contemplate your own feelings about what the final vote on some of these streets should be. Again, for me, the report, we need to keep in mind that, this is a comprehensive set of recommendations we're providing. We'll be the first city in this nation to do something this comprehensive in terms of scope. And it is warranted that, we do so, which is why the council came up with the ordinance. Because the public policy dictates that the council represents all of its citizens. And we know very well, in spite of some comments we've heard earlier, that this city has not always represented all of its citizens, even those in the majority. This process is not simply for the majority of the people in this city. It is for all the people in the city. And there is great common ground that we have found in our period of conversations with the public on these changes and proposed ways to improve our coexistence together based on some of the things we're doing today. And that has been very encouraging to me and to other commissioners as well, I'm sure. And I hope that as we go forward and some of these are adopted, that the communities around these streets and monuments and places really step up and take the lead and making sure that these are not just cosmetic changes, that these are substantive changes that help the community grow and learn each other's history that has not been told on the streets of the city previous to now. And, it helps us learn how to respect, love, honor, and live together better, which is, I think, at the heart and the spirit of what this council's ordinance was meant to do. So that, again, the final report will be substantively, will encompass most of what the initial report had, of course. So it won't look drastically different, right? Other than where we change some of the substance based on the information that we've gotten since it was published initially. I will, of course, be asking that each commissioner, go through and look at it with an eye toward the district that they represent, so that we make sure that we have fully addressed everything that we have been given, right? People gave the comments for us to use, not just to have submitted them. And, I think we have done a very good job so far of making the use of the comments that we've been given. And I just want to make sure we continue that as we look at this final report as it goes out. It is my hope that you will have that draft of that final report shortly after this meeting, the second week of February, to give you some time to live with it and read it before we do turn it in. Do any of you have any questions about the final report or comments? Hearing none. Andrew, is there any public comment on this agenda item?
Yeah, I apologize, Kyle. You might have gotten cut off there. Our Zoom just rebooted over here.
Okay.
Yeah, so maybe the last 30 seconds of what you said, if you just want to repeat it.
He didn't get cut off.
Okay.
But maybe
I'm not sure if it actually went out on the YouTube, though, because I think
gotcha.
I just want to make sure that we get it for the public.
Yeah, I'll just repeat the last portion of it is that, we I want you all to take the report, which hopefully you'll have the draft of it shortly after the meeting, the second week of February, so that you can each look at it with an eye to the constituents in the city that you were appointed to represent, so that we make sure that all of the input that we've received is, reflected in our judgment as we provide the report to the council. And also, I basically stated that, we have been, again, very impressed at the back and forth with the public and the value of that give and take. And so let's make sure we look at this final report and make sure that we are looking at it from the point of view of our constituents, as well as the overall mission of this ordinance in the commission. Does anyone have any questions about the final report or comments? Hearing none. Andrew, if there are public comments?
Yes, there are. First comment is from William McGrath, not a paid representative. I am totally shocked at the possibility of the city commission even considering the renaming of certain streets in the city. I thought that by the removal of monuments would have shown you the foolery of such. You have to ask yourself if it in any way helped your citizens. Even though most, if not all of you, may not have been involved with that abomination of disgrace to all citizens of our country, this is just more of the same. How can you justify renaming streets? Will this help educate the young? Is this worth the financial expenditure? Was it worth it when you people tore down the monuments? I think not. Next comment is by Mamie Fish, not a paid representative. I am opposed to the eradication of history by renaming streets. It is deplorable action and erases the uniqueness of New Orleans. Next comment is by Charlene Cable, not a paid representative. I am opposed to renaming any streets, especially at this time. The city is having financial troubles right now with COVID, and we have bigger issues such as crime to deal with and spend money on. Businesses are struggling to stay open, and you want to put them out of money for changing documents related to new street names. This is not something we should be focused on. Why in the world would a city struggling to pay police and firemen be willing to put out money to change historic street names that most don't even know who the people they are named for? Have you even asked people on the street whose names they are? Bet you find no one that knows or even cares. What purpose does it serve other than being PC? These streets are known worldwide and have historical significance, good or bad. While I can see changing one or two street names, this extensive list is ridiculous and unnecessary waste of resources. Also, if we must change name, let's just make them generic names. Why put people's names when 40 years from now, someone will be offended by the names and we will need to change them again? I've lived in New Orleans all my life, and I'm asking, please reconsider this waste of money and put funds where they are needed to fight crime, repair drainage, and fix the same streets you want to rename. Thank you. Next comment is by Chef G, not a paid representative. The white liberal is the worst enemy to America and the worst enemy to the black man. The liberal elements of whites are those who have perfected the art of selling themselves to the Negro as a friend of the Negro, getting sympathy of the Negro, getting the allegiance of the Negro, and getting the mind of the Negro. Then the Negro sides with the white liberal, and the white liberal uses the Negro against the white conservative. That's a 1963 quote by Malcolm X, still poignant today. The white liberals are altering this city, not improving it. And if the ideal political pawn comes along in a few years, they will turn on the blacks in New Orleans, embrace that group. Your street names will go, your history will be removed. This is your game you're playing, steered by white liberals. Next comment is by Charles Marsala, not a paid representative. Dear Commissioners, thank you for your service. I'm commenting on the final report timeline in his comments. The final report should include how the seventh whereas clause in the motion M20-170 was met, whereas New Orleans' troubling history of mistreatment of violence towards immigrant groups require remedy through true reconciliation and healing, which may only occur by ensuring robust and transparent public conversation. Now, more than 6 months after the commission is formed, there's been no agenda item to discuss the mistreatment of Italian immigrants and what is the remedy. I ask you to place importance on this objective of your commission and place the Italian allotment of streets on your agenda. Governor Nichols Street is in the heart of what the Italian colony or Little Palermo and should receive an Italian name. I suggest Salvatore Catalano, who was the pilot of Stephen Decatur's ship in 1805. In December, I sent a partial analysis of errors and omissions I saw in the initial report. Later, I found that stakeholders in areas of towns found errors such as Leonidas Street and Taylor Street as having nothing to do with Confederacy. I broke my comments into 4 areas, chapters. 1, pages 1 through 8 are recognizing Italian contributions in Little Palermo. 2, pages 9 through 13 are on Tivoli Circle and Victory Place as a Blue Star and Gold Star Memorial. 3, pages 10 through 29 are a partial review of the final report covering some of the items I am familiar with. 4, pages 30 through 33 are questioning what is not mentioned in this report that should be. Next comment is by Everett and Michelle Bielma, not a paid representative. We respectfully oppose the actions of the committee to rename the streets, especially at this time, for the following reasons. The condition of the streets in New Orleans is deplorable. Instead of spending large sums of money to rename the streets, the city should concentrate on fixing the streets. The city is experiencing a huge loss of revenue and sales tax due to the shutdown of tourism and hospitality industries. Hard-earned tax dollars should address the city's infrastructure, police crime, and the education of children of New Orleans. The citizens of New Orleans are suffering physically and emotionally with lost jobs, income, and the pandemic. And now this month they're struggling to pay property taxes. Please table this discussion of name change until later time. This handpicked, non-elected committee of experts should not usurp the voice of the people to decide on the issues of the names of their streets. Let's see. The next comment is by Melvin Schneider, not a paid representative. Please defer this report in communication to further future dates. More comprehensive research needs to be completed. Please do not rename streets, as Lakeview is not in favor of changing streets, and there are too many residents have fond memories across these streets in the city built up over centuries. Next comment is by Mark Rudenay. Please note the Let's Get It Right article in the December 16, 2020 New Orleans Tribune. Dr. Charles Rudenay deserves to be honored in city streets renaming process without question. We at the Modern Day New Orleans Tribune are disheartened to learn that Dr. Louis Charles Rudenay's name, though high on the list of those recommended, has been supplanted by another in the city's street renaming process. We cannot think of another New Orleanian more deserving to have a street named in his honor than Dr. Rudenay. Surely there is no one living amongst us who is more worthy. We know very well the contributions Dr. Rudenay made to our city, state, nation as a physician, newspaper publisher, and civil rights activist. In fact, our newspaper, the Modern Day New Orleans Tribune, was founded in 1985 in honor and the spirit of Dr. Rudenay, who championed the cause of civil rights for Black people, both free and enslaved, through the pages of his newspaper and in the work he did throughout the community. We strongly urge this committee to reconsider Dr. Louis Charles Rudenay's name for what is now Capitol Street as it explores renaming streets and other public spaces in New Orleans. Dr. Dwight and Beverly McKenna, publishers, the New Orleans Tribune. Next comment is by John Bunning, not a paid representative in a financially strapped city. Where is the money coming from to replace hundreds and hundreds of street signs? In the rules for naming streets, it says that the streets to be named for someone, they should be dead for at least 5 years, that they have already named Norman Francis Boulevard, though he is still alive. And that's all the public comment on this one.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Andrew. Commissioners, do you have any other comments on this item, or can we move on? Hearing nothing, we will move on to agenda item 7, stakeholder engagement. I asked Commissioner Hill if she could give us a quick report on the stakeholder engagement since the last meeting.
Yes, I'll just do an overall summary to let folks know what we have done so far. We have actually held we've actually held 9 meetings in terms of our public engagement, 10 as of today, and 1 additional public hearing on December the 16th. We've had numerous meetings with various neighborhood associations and other neighborhood organizations and individuals that will be documented in our final report. And we are working on actually documenting how many public comments we have received throughout the process as well.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Hill. And just as a reminder to the public, all comments that have been submitted through the website at nolaccsrc.org will be made a part of the final report given to the commissioners, or to the city council. So if you have comments that you have emailed, particularly to the individual representatives on this commission, I also strongly encourage you to go and put those in those formal comment forms on the website. That again will be submitted to the city council as part of the final report. And we want to make sure that your comments are there. Also, we'll likely have more we'll have more outreach and are open to more outreach if someone would like to meet with us prior to our next meeting. As I stated earlier, by that meeting, we'll make our final votes on our recommendations. So before we turn in our final report. So if you have a need to meet with us or would like to, please reach out immediately so that we can schedule that and get your input prior to doing this report. While we acknowledge that there's no way that we will ever get 100% meetings with everyone who may be impacted here, those of you who do have the ability to and want to have that, we want to accommodate you where we can. There likely will be other outreach from our, in terms of our stakeholder engagement as we move forward with the final report. At the next meeting, we can discuss more of that as it is more concrete, how we will release the report and things of that nature. Does anyone have any other comments on stakeholder engagement?
Carl, just so everyone knows, we're still working on that Holly Grove meeting that we've had stopped and fits and starts on for months. I'm hopeful that we're going to get something scheduled within the next week to 10 days. I'll keep you posted.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I know that we've been keen to meet with them, and they have certainly been keen to meet with us. We just haven't been able to get it locked down. Yeah.
I'd like to add that I've reached out to the Fairgrounds community and the Seabrook community. They both want to meet as well.
Okay, perfect. So again, we're on the clock at this point, right? So if we can get those set, and hopefully well in advance of the next meeting in the second week of February, that would be great, so that we can have time to, take in what has been given to us so that it can be incorporated into our conversation and voting on that day, as well as into the final report itself. Are there any other comments, commissioners? Hearing none. Andrew, are there any public comments to this portion?
Yes, there are. First comment is from Dr. Amy L. Sandridge. The scope of the commission is to remedy the historical mistreatment of local immigrant groups. Changing the name of Tivoli Circle would only add to this mistreatment by further insulting our Italian-American community. More outreach is required than has been contemplated at this time. Next comment is by Reverend Larry Bean, not a paid representative. In his dystopian novel, 1984, George Orwell wrote, "One could not learn history from architecture anyone more than one could learn it from books. Statues, inscriptions, memorial stones, and names of streets, anything that might throw light upon the past has been systematically altered." The renaming of streets in historic New Orleans is literally an Orwellian action. In 1984, Orwell was using literature to criticize the governing philosophy of the Soviet Union, which sought to seize control of the narrative by rewriting history. The USSR was authoritarian, did not respect human life, became a snitch culture, sucked the joy and humanity out of everyone, and eventually collapsed. Is that the path that the commission and city political leadership desires to follow? The next comment is by Charles Marsala, not a paid representative. Thank you for your service. I'm commenting on stakeholder engagement. The website proceeds. The CCSRC encourages ongoing and open dialogue with all involved parties and stakeholders, including the panel of experts, partners on the council, and members of the community, to ensure the recommendations provided in its final report embrace diversity and create a space for healing and reconciliation for generations to come. Last year, when the initial draft was released and voted on, I emailed you an 8-page report on the Italian immigrant history, as there was nothing in the report to indicate the mistreatment of Italians was researched by the committee, and a remedy recommendation position stated. Several names are suggested, as well as a meeting with leaders of the Italian community to hear what names we preferred. The report has an asterisk on Tivoli Circle. On researching the asterisk, I found the 1877 ordinance in reference to the work done during 1807 to 1810 to name the street Tivoli Circle. It seems the state government knew its history and hid it from the citizens of the town. The Italian community views renaming Tivoli Circle as mistreatment, and I encourage the commission to discuss the matter with the Italian community and to remove it from the report as it does not qualify to be reviewed. We support keeping Tivoli Circle and making the land inside its Victory Place as a Blue Star Memorial to honor all U.S. military veterans of all war. The closeness to the World War II Museum adds to this proposal. Ms. Chase could be honored at Duncan Plaza, or renamed Duncan Plaza as Chase Plaza. Next comment is from Gary Mason. Not a paid representative. Please do not rename any streets. The idea of renaming streets is not a priority in our city. City leadership should focus on fixing pressing problems like crime, drainage, infrastructure, homelessness, city underfunded pensions. Renaming streets is not proper use of city funds and resources. Next comment is by Michael Wallace, not a paid representative. While I understand the desire to rename streets, there are much more pressing issues to focus on at this time. I'll remind the council, murders are up in this city. What is your plan to reduce violence? Do you have one? This should be your primary focus. If this city and parish are unsafe, people will leave and so will your tax base. 2, carjackings and car break-ins are way up. What is your plan to address this? Again, this is a quality of life issue and directly affects all New Orleanians. 3, the New Orleans economy is struggling. What is your plan to diversify the heavily tourist and convention business that was now largely inexistent? There's less money coming into the city. How are you going to solve this problem? Cutting programs, which programs? Cutting city jobs? Which city jobs will be cut? Mayor and city council staff. Have all the roads and potholes in the city been fixed? It is worth noting that Tivoli Circle has existed as an iconic mainstay since 1810, has no connections to the Confederacy, and is completely unrelated to the renaming commission's purpose. More outreach is required with the stakeholder engagement. The scope of the commission is to remedy the historical mistreatment of local immigrant groups. Taking away Tivoli Circle would only add to said mistreatment by further insulting the Italian-American community. Thank you for listening. Again, there are much more pressing issues, and if these issues are not addressed in the very near future, New Orleans will not be much of a home for anyone. Next comment is by Melvin Schneider, not a paid representative. There's not been enough stakeholder engagement, the majority input. The majority of residents in Lakeview are opposed to renaming within the neighborhood. More input should be reviewed from residents of neighborhood and associated civic groups before any changes are made. Several streets suggested for renaming are named for Mexican-American War Service. After the city panel released their reports, a citizen found a map dating to 1833 with Leonidas Street reference. So it clearly has no ties with the Civil War. The sloppy and careless research done by the commission's appointed researchers proves that they are neither independent nor honest in their efforts. Please refrain from moving forward until we can have a complete and honest review with greater input from the local community. The last comment is by Thomas Bordenave. It seems to me that those with the most direct interest, those who live on the streets themselves, should have the greatest weight, as they are the ones with the greatest inconvenience from the renaming. After hearing a few of the commissioners on the radio, they seem to have a superior attitude, and their remarks gave one the idea that they don't care what residents think. And that is all the comments on this.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And again, as I stated earlier, we don't normally comment line by item on things that are stated, but several recurring themes have happened, and I feel a need to respond to some of them. One of which is that we are not erasing history. We are embracing the added factual portions of history that were sinisterly left out as these streets were named and subsequently tell the story of the city of New Orleans. I would like for those who make that that continue to make that statement to think about that and hear me as I say that. We are not erasing history. We are adding facts that were sinisterly left out, therefore including people who are a large portion of the history of this city that are more than 95% of our streets that tell those stories are not telling. The other, I'd like to thank Salvatore Perricone, who sent us some very valuable information on the Italian-American lynching that happened to support their his and the Italian-American Federation's comments on Tivoli Circle. All that information was welcomed and very interesting to see. Again, Andrew, I ask you, the city continues to focus on work on street conditions, crime, the pandemic, and other major issues, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. And I would also like to state that city workers at City Hall are currently on furlough or have taken a 10% pay cut. So we feel very readily what the economic conditions of this city are.
Thank you. And none of the volunteers on this commission are employed by the city to address any of those other pressing issues, civic issues, nor are we preventing city officials or the employees from dealing with those issues, correct?
That is correct.
That is correct. Thank you. I would like to consistently remind the public that multitasking, especially at a high level like a government function, is it's everyday activity, right? It's a high level activity, and these folks do it very well, especially when you bring into consideration the lack of funding that they may be having because of historical issues with the city that are more costly than in most cities based on the history, the very history and age of the city. So, again, not trying to be very defensive, but I am a little defensive about the attack on the city employees and elected officials when statements are cavalierly made that they are not or ignoring the pressing issues of the city because they are looking also at this issue. That's the whole point to raising a council of advisors who are volunteer, so that we don't or limit the city's resources that are being taken away to look at issues that really matter outside of their everyday germane issues of sewage, water protection, and everything else. So I just like the public to keep that in mind and not cavalierly throw that statement around because it is an individual may not be happy that this process is occurring. It's not a fair attack and it shouldn't happen. Any of the commissioners have any other statements about this particular agenda item? Hearing none, we'll move on to other matters. Commissioners, are there any other matters you'd like to discuss today? Hearing none, if there is no further business, we have concluded our.
Commissioner Connor, we do have about 30 comments on other matters.
On other matters, okay.
It's up to the commission. This isn't a voting item, and so technically we do not need to read the public comment, but if it's the will of the commission, I'm happy to sit here and read it.
So, I mean, you've got a limit on how many you can read anyway, right? I would suggest those that aren't duplicates, of course, and if you can read some of them into the record, and then we'll, of course, make sure that they are in the record for posterity, those that don't do that.
All of these are part of the public record, and I can circulate them with the commission, but again, because there is no voting item here, we are not required to read the public comment. I will say, though, I think that what I would be told is if we read some, we should read all. So I will read them all if it's will. So.
I got you. So commissioners, what is your will here? I'll go to your will. I mean, obviously we will read them. We'll get them anyway. So, you all tell me whether you'd like to have them read and hear them or simply accept them into the record and move on to the next item.
I think in the spirit of engagement and transparency, that it's probably best to read them to the record and hear what people have to say.
Okay.
I agree.
Yep. Thank you very much. So Andrew, if you wouldn't mind lubricating your voice.
Sure.
Thank you, Andrew.
First comment is by Kenneth McNair. I would humbly request that CCSRC members consider Mr. George Rainey, the well-beloved Algiers resident, in renaming a street in District C. His bio is available through the Zulu Social Aid Organization. Next comment is by S.R. Perricone, not a paid representative. Renaming Tivoli Circle. Having been born and raised in New Orleans, I can confidently assert New Orleans is not only a city, but a living museum. Every elected official of the city is her curator and must remember that every day. Since its founding on the muddy banks of the Mississippi, New Orleans has been a refuge of many immigrants, including Italians. New Orleans history has not been kind to the Italian immigrant, but they persevered and made significant contributions to our development. Tivoli Circle was named after an area in Italy and was a grand meeting spot for all New Orleanians since before the Civil War. Indeed, the name has never been changed despite the erection of the memorial. While wanting to change the name, just remember it's not necessary. It has always been Tivoli Circle, even as I write this. Thank you. Next comment is by Jackie Nichols. Street renaming is a waste of money that can be better spent on infrastructure. Next comment is by Albert Frater. Not a paid representative. I'm opposed to renaming of streets in New Orleans, which represents a financial hardship on businesses on their streets. These businesses are already suffering and are struggling with expenses. I believe the city council should not be the keeper of the city's morality. There should be a citywide referendum to decide if this is an action that should be taken. Next comment is by Doris Molenkopf, not a paid representative. Streets and park name changes. Stop rewriting history. Stop trying to rewrite history. Street names denote a specific period in time and are well established in society. The attempt to change what has been established long before this administration is ludicrous. It is also vain. So just fill the potholes and spend taxpayer money on that. Thank you, Doris Molenkopf. Next comment is by Martin DeLoreal, not a paid representative. Offer my strong opposition to the city's current effort to change street names, and replace historic monuments, and ask, when you've changed all street signs, removed all monuments from our past, and recast history to your liking, will we then be safer, better able to educate our children, provide meaningful employment, and repair our streets? The painful, obvious answer is no. The entire effort to erase our history is misguided, certainly will not unite us, and it will not benefit us. At a time when this poor city can't fund basic services, is closing down businesses, many of which won't reopen, it somehow has the time and money to waste attempt to rewrite our history, instead of learning from it and moving on about it, doing the people's business. This comment is from Charles Adams. Taking politics out of the argument, the proposed names will not fit on standard street signs and will meet the lettering height requirements of the MUTCD, minimum 4.5 inches. If you do make them 4.5 inches in height, the signs will be ridiculously long, therefore creating unnecessary cost to a city that is having financial issues. If the city is hell-bent on removing any names they deem to be offensive, may I suggest you take a baby name book and randomly book out names. That way no one can claim offense to a name and you have a better chance of them being readable to the motoring public. Or can you stop letting folks that were not raised in New Orleans and do not care about our unique history dictate to us what should be offensive and how we should do things? Next comment is by Terrell Corley. Please retain Robert E. Lee Boulevard. Next comment is by Charles Gibson. Not a paid representative. Time, effort, and money should be spent educating citizens instead of simply removing names. There are many things in the city of New Orleans that any person can find offensive. An educated public is the sign of an advanced society. History should be preserved. Next comment is by John Kokomer. I would have you consider Leon C. Simon be renamed for Toussaint. Robert E. Lee could revert back to Hibernia. This would accomplish the same goals. Next comment is by Kathleen Kalogny. Apologies for the pronunciation. All name changes that are not related to anything deemed offensive should be eliminated from this list, as well as those with 3 or more names. Some are up to 5 names, including nicknames. This shows the lack of appreciation for the city's offer to recognize them and makes the city look backward. Next comment is by Michael Raynor. Disagree 100% with renaming streets. Next comment is by J.W. McFarland Jr. As a longtime visitor to New Orleans who has been honored to be awarded a key to the city, I will never again visit with my family if you rename the streets of New Orleans and try to erase American history in the process. Next comment is by Edward G. Ernewine. Again, apologies for the pronunciation. There is something wrong with using the blanket Confederate as a rationale to rename all these streets. They should have been considered separately, renaming Tulane Avenue, Capitol Avenue, Governor Nichols. Good luck getting people to identify the 2400 block of Tutti Montana. Instead of being honored, they will be reviled. A street name for Mayor Patton is offensive. I provided each member of the council my detailed complaints and have received no acknowledgement of receipt. A simple thanks but no thanks would have sufficed. The entire process is simply the orgasmic dream of Take 'em Down in New Orleans, and I did not know a communist-led organization could do so much to destroy the living museum that is New Orleans. Locals will need roadmaps to determine where they are going. I can picture a bus with Montana on the electric scroll, missing that bus, Myrtle waiting for the 2-lane bus. You can't keep your own automobile safe, but this is a big deal. Come on, man. Next comment is by Faye Harris. That comment was left blank. Next comment is by Faye Harris. Oh, there we go. Faye Harris, excuse me. I'm not a paid representative. Renaming streets without consent from people who live on or near is foolish, expensive, and you cannot rewrite history, even new or lease. City council, leave it alone. The last thing we need now is more division. Next comment is by Charles Leonard, not a paid representative. I'm writing to express strong opposition to renaming streets, which will create confusion throughout the city with no tangible benefit. These monies would be much better used repairing streets, enhancing school reading programs, and for social programs. Thank you for considering my comments. Next comment is by Tom Crane, not a paid representative. I think it is unwise to change the name of our streets in New Orleans. The names of Confederate heroes represent decent, honorable men who defended their homes as they saw it. The proposed names are praiseworthy also, but there is no benefit to changing valuable history, New Orleans history. Next comment is by Thomas Collins, not a paid representative. Is not Lee Circle still officially Tivoli? If so, this isn't in the scope of the commission and should still remain Tivoli. Also, have you actually checked the accuracies of some of the streets names that you have attributed to Civil War participants? I know you removed Leonidas from the list, thankfully. Lastly, it's sad that a loyal citizen must even take the time to chime in. Your commission is a classic example of Nero fiddling while Rome burns. Much like the monuments, how will this solve or even begin to solve our crime and infrastructure problems? Maybe it can confuse the potential car break-in because they were looking for a formally named street, but that about the extent of benefits that this will derive. Silly, misguided, and a waste of valuable and in extremely short supply resources. Next comment is by Stephanie Spencer, not a paid representative, no street renaming. Next comment is by Kevin Laborde, not a paid representative. While this exercise is intended to remove objectionable recognition of certain individuals associated with white supremacy of the Confederacy, the suggested name changes appear to fall short of an enduring solution. I think I understand the sentiments and emotion involved in all of this, but wouldn't the community be better served by using names that are indigenous to the area rather than specific individuals? What's to stop future generations from changing street names when they decide the time is right to learn that a certain individual displayed some objectionable character at some point in his or her life? We have interesting topography, musical instruments, trees, birds, ducks, fish, reptiles, carnival, and a host of other things to draw from that will hopefully be here forever. It strikes me that these name changes are a burden the city should not have to bear. Let's find other creative ways to honor individuals worthy of recognition and come up with streets names that will stand the test of time rather than reap satisfaction in the moment. Next comment is by Scott Darnell, not a paid representative. I'm not in favor of a movement to rename streets. We have far too many more issues affecting the region and the city to be dedicated time and resources to this agenda. It has been over 15 years since Hurricane Katrina dealt the city a terrible hand. We had so much to move forward on, and instead we are now regressing. I see no positive outcome or moving forward with this issue. Our streets are in deplorable condition, and we now focus on name changes. The measure seems more to do with erasing the history of the past. The movement will only alienate more of us. Its directive appears to be driven to erase our own history, dissenting opinions, actions, and practices. However, in my opinion, it smacks of revenge and setting old scores at any cost. People will always disagree and have different opinions based on their own experiences. We cannot change who we are and judge those who lived under different times and conditions than we do. Those who came before us built the city, the collective of all of them and their experiences of what makes the city so unique. We are losing our character and becoming more like Portland, Oregon, and Cleveland, Ohio. I no longer live in the city of New Orleans, and my thoughts on this may not seem relevant to those who are reading them because of that fact. I can tell you the action of this council and past three mayors continues to alienate many. The city has seen a population decline in every U.S. census taken since 1960. It is bleeding citizens and businesses at an alarming rate. Our neighboring states and municipal areas have seen tremendous growth within the last 60 years. What is the city going to do to stop the erosion? Renaming streets is hardly tangible progress. Our tourism, convention, and hospitality business have been severely crippled. Why is this relevant to someone who no longer lives in the city? Consider this: at one time I did the majority of my business in the city of New Orleans. I did the majority of my work in the city or on the city-run property. Now I do essentially less than 10% of my work or business in the city. Something needs to change for sure if the city is going to move forward with a viable future. It's dying. The numbers speak for themselves of them, the sad fact. The continued erosion will continue as long as this city continues to focus on division. Renaming streets will only cause more strife for citizens and business owners. And that is 2 minutes. Next comment is by Christine Bates. Paid representative, please quit changing street names. There are so many more important matters that need to be taken care of. Please stop wasting time and money on frivolous things like this. This will only confuse locals and tourists both, and it's just a simple, complete waste of time and money. Next comment is by Joseph Bordelon, not a paid representative. Renaming streets in New Orleans. I know I don't live in the city. I used to, and I know that whatever I say will not change your mind, so go ahead and change the names of the streets. You're going to do it no matter how many people are opposed to it. Eventually you realized it was a bad idea, but it will be too late by then. I used to love going to New Orleans and spending my money in a city on food, entertainment, and most of all enjoying the history of the city, not anymore. New Orleans has become a city that's lost its popularity. So go ahead and do whatever you're going to do. Take down Andrew Jackson while you're at it. They want that too. Next comment is by Keith Jones, not a paid representative. The renaming of Robert E. Lee Boulevard is a disgrace and should not be allowed. Keep the name. Next comment is by Camille Breland, not a paid representative. Please do not attempt to rename the streets. History is valuable. It may not be perfect, but you learn from it. You don't try to erase it or change it, nor try to make political statements. Let New Orleans remain the great city has always been. Next comment is by Paul Guidry, not a paid representative. I strongly oppose renaming any streets. We must acknowledge and accept our history and heritage. We must also acknowledge and accept one another. Renaming streets will solve nothing. Next comment is by George Schmidt, not a paid representative. The street renaming movement is Bolshevik, and it's an ignorance and an attack on the historical poetry of the city of New Orleans. While you are at it, why not a street renaming in the Broadmoor section of the city named collectively in honor of the Landrews? Fontainebleau Drive could be renamed Bubba Drive. Next comment is by Gary Mason, not a paid representative. Judging yesterday's historical figures and events by today's politically correct standards is a slippery slope with no logical end. It's wrong and removes part of the city's history that should be preserved. Next comment is by Shane Miller, not a paid representative. My wife and I are frequent visitors to your city for strictly leisure, mostly in October. We have always loved your city. It is one of the richest histories of any city, not only in the U.S., but in the world. I am an amateur historian of sorts and a longtime member of both the National World War II Museum as well as Memorial Hall. It hurt me greatly when your beautiful statues were removed. Please don't further erase the city's uniqueness in American history by changing all of the street names as proposed. I think embracing your history is a better plan. No one else has this history New Orleans has. It's a tragedy to wipe it away. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. Next comment is by Charles Marsala, not a paid representative. Dear commissioners, regarding the Street Commission website, please consider adding articles that offering a different viewpoint than the existing news articles. Suggest that you add the June 2020 article in Big Easy magazine that Tivoli Circle is the long-time name of the circles, 64 parishes as an article, Louisiana secession from the Union. The article states secessionists capture the majority of the seats. While exact results are impossible to obtain, the best estimates indicate that 80 delegates should be labeled secessionists in contrast to 44 cooperationists and 6 unknown. The overall vote totals point to a less decisive victory. The official state reserve returns, which were not released for more than a century, the secessionist delegates is capturing 52.7% of the vote. James G. Taliaferro, Catahoula Parish delegate, one of the convention's most ardent unionists, lodged a protest against secession, contending that it presaged anarchy and war. Only 36,000 men voted, meaning the public vote to succeed was 19,000, with 17 voted to stay in the Union. Less than 2,000 votes was the difference, with 25% less voting than had voted in November 1860. Many of the people in the commission's report calls traitors as simple soldiers being responsible to a democratic vote of the people secede based on constitutional right of states. Some of those issues were the states' rights to declare a high and unequal tariff as null and void. Other states' rights. State right was the right to deny federal troops permission to march through their state to wage war on another state. Since Moon Landrieu erected Washington Artillery Confederate Monument, why not ask him why he did it? Maybe that reason applies to the streets and other monuments as well. Next comment is by Ann Casserole, not a paid representative. Would like to submit the name of globally famous jazz musician R.E. Lee Boulevard, change Pete Fountain. Thanks. Next comment is Mr. and Mrs. St. Martin, not a paid representative. We object to all the street name changes. The cost of signage is enormous at a time when the city of New Orleans is financially hurting. This doesn't include workers who must be paid to erect such signage all over town. The cost to citizens who live on the streets where names are being changed. And for businesses, this entails stationary costs, business cards, etc. For drivers who are familiar with street names, is going to cause traffic havoc, and the list is even longer. The post office has to deal with names changes as well as taxi drivers and Ubers who chose these names. As the city council research each person in history, it's getting granted a street named after them just to learn or not they are impeccable personalities. Why is there no vote? Why do the streets need to be changed to have a person's name? Why not numbers? Why not non-controversial words like lagoon, oak, tree, camellia, cypress, garden? What on earth is this city council doing regarding this costly project while everyone in America and thus in NOLA is dealing with life and death issues, COVID issues, and have no means of income? This is about the most insane project the city can propose to taxpaying citizens with a 24-hour time window to discuss it. Many of the names proposed are longer, thus more costly than what is being replaced, and many of the roads and avenues are blocks to miles long, which means signage is a huge undertaking. Who is getting compensated for this enormous job, and how much will it really cost? Some of these names to be honored by a street names are drug users, womenizers, controversial, and even unknown. Is the New Orleans City Council going to stop this list or continue on its merry way until every street name in our century-old city is changed? Then what? Next comment is by Melvin Schneider, not a paid representative. He is again asking to defer action on this matter. Next comment is by Lane Booz, not a paid representative. I oppose renaming streets in New Orleans and erasing our historical heritage. Next comment is by Donna DeBull Flower, not a paid representative. I urge you to reconsider renaming Calhoun Street. Doing so is a real convenience for so many residents and businesses and will make no impact on radical racial justices that you are trying to improve if you do your homework. So many that have chosen the cancel culture route have become socialists and created more poverty than ever before. It is not the way to go. Thank you for your hard work in considering all our concerns. Donna Flower. Last comment is by Larry D. Tarver, not a paid representative. I'd like to express my displeasure and disagreement with any renaming of streets in NOLA. It would hide this city's historical values. Thanks, concerned citizen. That's all the public comments.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And to the citizen who stated that they would like us not to remove the or rename the streets that are named currently after heroic Confederate soldiers, I would say to you that your definition of heroes differs greatly from the majority of people who live in this city, and that names like John Jack Nelson, Lolis Ely, Nils Douglas, Burnett Joshua Johnson would all be more akin to what a hero is defined as opposed to people whose biggest life accomplishment can be summed up in their fight to enslave their fellow human beings. So that being said, if no commissioners have any other comments on the agenda today, one, do you all have any comments?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, please go, Richard. I appreciate that, Commissioner Westmoreland.
Okay, if we're going to go down this road with, we're going right back to where we were in 2015 in these city council hearings with some of these comments. So, commissioners, I would say we have to address some of this stuff. So, does everybody here remember what was on the Liberty Place monument? Probably not. And I'm hoping any of the folks listening listen up to this. The inscription on the Liberty Place monument said, United States troops took over the state government and reinstated the usurpers. But the national election, November 1876, recognized white supremacy in the South and gave us our state. And that's the mindset that we're here talking about. That's really the bottom line to all of this that we're talking about. We go through a lot of pro forma and a lot of process and procedure, but the bottom line is the issue that we are dealing with has been here a long time. And now we're chipping away at it in the last 50 years. And a lot of people are upset about it. They don't want to admit it, but whoever wrote that inscription, they admitted it. They said it right up front, and the issue is white supremacy. So let's think for a second. I think we talked about 95% of the streets named in New Orleans are white men. And so if you look at every street that was named in New Orleans before 1950, I bet you it's 100%. And that's the issue that we're talking about. So in the decades of the past, our streets were named, let's face it, guys, by white supremacists. For the most part. I'm not going to say everybody walking the planet back then or walking in New Orleans was a white supremacist, but that was kind of the rule of the day. We had white only signs everywhere in the city, in the state, and that's just how it was. So all of our streets, the monuments were put up by those people who are okay with those things. And I'm not going to say every street name or every monument that was put up was an attempt to further that cause. But I can tell you what, the 4 monuments we took down, those most certainly were. All of the streets that we're talking about here, yeah, that's what it's about, guys. It's hard to admit, it's hard to talk about, and we don't talk about it enough. But we're getting these comments by guys like Charles Marsala and Gary Mason. These are the same guys we're wrestling with this issue with back in 2015. So here's the thing. Yeah, these are today's what's left over from those days. We're slowly but surely righting the wrongs of yesterday. It wasn't that long ago that in a couple of our lifetimes on this committee, when we had white only signs in New Orleans. So these street names and the monuments that we took down a couple of years ago, it's the same thing. These are just a little bit more subtle, but these are today's white only signs that we're removing. So, the Confederacy, America's Third Reich, it's that simple. And people want to keep talking about Robert E. Lee and this myth. The head of the history department at West Point just came out with a book. Please educate yourself on really who Robert E. Lee was. He's not the person that we all grew up thinking he was, as folks, citizens in the South. And I am one of those as well, even though I wasn't born in New Orleans. So anyway, so I just, I'm going to throw it out to other commissioners. We can't keep listening to this babble that's borderline, right back where we were in 2015, some of the most racist things I ever heard in my life in the city council chambers, without speaking up a little bit and calling this out for what it is and reminding everybody what it is we're actually here for.
Thank you, Commissioner Westmoreland. Do any other commissioners have any comments or questions?
I would just comment that I think it is important for everybody, especially people who are making comments, many of which are uninformed or informed by not our true history, to read the reports that are available on the website. I guarantee you, I certainly admit that there are many things that I didn't know, and it's been an incredible learning experience. And I think we all are better when we are better educated and we understand the truth. And a lot of important work by experts was done to pull these reports together, as well as some input from community members. And I just think that it's only fair for you to read that before you are adding comments that may or may not be true. And I think that's very important.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Hill. And I'd just like to also add that I said this in previous meetings, we all have varying ideas about all the topics that are being discussed with regard to removal of monuments or street names and all those things. And I'm a proponent and have been all the way back to the original removal of those 4 monuments of context rather. And one of the monuments that was removed that I thought might have been a better teaching tool had it been left up was Beauregard. And simply for this reason, because after the Civil War happened, Beauregard tried to lead a movement to more speedily integrate society. Because he felt that if we didn't try to integrate the Negro into society quicker, then it would be to the detriment of all society. That movement failed, of course, but every day, we hope that people learn something, see something, that makes their minds or hearts change about things that are obviously not right to some, but not necessarily to others based on the, environment they grew up in or the perspective that they have always seen or been given, right? And in that particular instance, I felt that Beauregard, in spite of his role in the Civil War, recognized reality. Right. And upon recognizing that reality, tried to lead a movement that would have us living more peacefully and better together quicker. I'm sure there are a bunch of people who are listening to this who are mad at me for saying that. Right. But it's facts. Right. You can't debate facts. The facts are the man led the movement for that reason. Right. So for me, adding an installation close to the statue that talked about his progression of thought in that way was probably an opportunity lost for context and education for something we're asking people to do today. So, as we move forward with this process, I think that, there are other instances where that matters, right? In my mind, without Edmund Pettus, you don't have the context for Congressman John Lewis, right? So, having those two things juxtaposing each other tell the full story and help us get to where we understand that someone who couldn't cross a bridge without being beaten in the 60s wound up being a congressman in the United States in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, right? I mean, those progression of history and the betterment of things have to be looked at, and you have to have something to compare those things to. So in some instances, there is no redeeming value to some folks who had names placed up on streets or monuments for them. And it's hard for anybody to really try to come up with it, right? And that's for, debate and policy discussions, right? And we welcome it. We hear it. I know it's hard to hear often, as Commissioner Westmoreland, basically said, but we have a right to say it, and also we need to hear it so that we can have honest, full-blown discussions about it all. At the end of the day, I still say that it is my sincere hope that this process, aside from its patriotic goals of removing Confederate names from our landscape, leads us to a place where we have substantive conversations, both organized and informal, that help us learn to live better together moving forward. That would be a success story from all of this in my mind. So I think I missed Commissioner Raymond. Did you have something you wanted to add?
I did. On January 6th, we watched the first insurrection on the Capitol that has happened in over 200 years. And you saw a sea of symbols. And one of the symbols that group decided to use was the Confederate flag. Seeing the Confederate flag walk through the halls of Congress with a group of violent individuals seeking to do harm because they were upset about the results of an election, I think should give us all of the fuel we need to continue to do this work. And to hear, the people in opposition typically always scream the loudest, right? People who support stuff are easygoing, go with the flow, don't always want to get involved with the muckety muck. And this just poetically reminds me of that. Hearing all of these comments about the heroic Robert E. Lee, quote unquote, is just disheartening and reminds me of those images of that mass of people storming the Capitol with Confederate flags. It's unfortunate that in 2021, that's what we're doing.
Yeah. And just to bring it all home, I'm a native of New Orleans, went to school here in high school in particular. I went to high school where I was the only Black person in my class who went through all 4 years of school with me. After my first year, there were 20 other African Americans in my freshman class. After our freshman year, I was the only one who returned to the school. I had very, bad experiences at this school, which was also a seminary, preparatory school, right? But that being said, fast forward 35 years later, some of the same people who wouldn't let me in their homes in the mid-1980s, I have conversations with today about the issues that we're talking about today, right? And we respect each other's opinions about it, but we have an honest and genuine conversation about what is going on in America today. And if you had asked me, would these conversations be happening 30 years ago, I'd say absolutely not. Who would continue to entertain people who wouldn't allow them in their homes 35 years ago, right? So, for me, we fast forward the 35 years, the mere fact that we're having these conversations, they're asking real, honest questions. They're not asking me to represent all Black people in my opinion, right? They're asking my genuine opinion about some of these things. They're accepting what I'm saying, and in some instances, changing their thought processes about it. Now, we all have that 35 years of history and understanding and meeting other people, because at the end of the day, it is who we interact with that makes a difference in how we interact with people, right? So, that being said, again, I hope that this process, which on its surface may appear to be cosmetic, morphs into a substantive change for everyone in this city. That is an example for the rest of the world as to how people live, work, and live together in spite of differing viewpoints and opinions. That is my hope. So any last comments by commissioners?
Racism
Yes,
is
I
so
like that.
blatant in New Orleans that it's plastered all over our streets.
So hearing no further comments, and if there's no further business, we have concluded our agenda and I declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you all for your participation and particularly that of the public. Have a good evening, guys.